Well, Smylie, we are back with another episode as we kind of build up to the Ryder Cup. It feels like the anticipation is absolutely killing me. I don't know if it's killing you. I just want to get there to the Ryder Cup already. You are physically going to get there to Rome, but are you feeling the same way, or are you just kind of enjoying the build up a little bit to Rome?
Oh man, I think those teams, the United States team and Team Europe, I think going to Marco. Hold on, I got to say it right because we just got an email.
Yes, this is huge.
It's not Marco Simone. It's actually three syllables. It's Marco Simone. Simone. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's because a lot of people have been saying
it doesn't even
Marco
sound right when I say it.
Well, a lot of people have been saying Marco Simone. So it's not Marco Simone. Not Marco Simone. It's Marco Simone. This is big breaking news.
Yep. Let's see. Here we go. Here's the email.
Okay.
The proper pronunciation is Marco Simone. 3 syllables.
This is big. Is this part of like your packet you get from NBC ahead of the Ryder Cup?
No, we haven't gotten anything like that yet. Just
okay.
I'm sitting here looking through my emails and see the Fortinet packet for this week. So that is also leaving tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. So
there you go.
Yeah. But yeah, kind of back to it. I think just, the anticipation, it's kind of, it felt like this far away thing for so long. And now seeing the teams on the grounds there last week, I thought honestly, I heard about the trips. I didn't realize that, they'd have like a social team and stuff there, just the day and age of, I thought this would be kind of a secret trip that this team was, the United States team was taking to kind of get a leg up on the European team. And then, you see a couple days later, all the social media of pretty much the trip documented, not like to a crazy extent, but just, kind of stuff you expect to see on social media today. And then Europe shows up a couple days later. So, I was thinking in my head, and this is like to put kind of what a professional golfer is thinking about in preparation for a golf course they've never seen before, especially that this event is only Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's unusual for a professional golfer to go to a different country to go play a practice round. So I want you to know like that these guys that are on the United States team, man, they've made a commitment like to go over there to Europe, especially for the guys that are playing in Fortinet this week. And then, the following week would be a week off, but, Ryder Cup's right around the corner. So you got to wonder about these guys. Like, man, that's a lot of travel. They just finished a long year. The last thing that a lot of these guys probably wanted to do is go hop on 8 to 10 hour flights to go play a practice round when they're going to be doing it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of Ryder Cup week. They're going to know this golf course too well come Friday.
Yeah. Well, I heard a factoid today that when I heard it, I was like, that just can't be right. That was Team Europe has never done a scouting trip. This is the first scouting trip Team Europe's ever done to a venue before a match has been played. Now, of course, a lot of these venues are historic and guys have played them before in tournaments or just, through regular prep or whatever else. But I thought that I was struck by the same set of things that you were struck by, which is first and foremost, we're living in an era where if it doesn't go on social media, it didn't happen. And I, just like the matching uniforms, like having a practice uniform, like where all the guys are hitting balls on the range and getting their work in, but like it has to be all uniform. That to me was interesting, funny. The same sort of deal on the Team Europe side where they had a similar level of polish and production value assigned to their scouting trip over there. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's a huge commitment for the U.S. team to go over there for the guys that are playing in the Fortinet and for Team Europe. That whole crew's just, I guess, cruising over to Wentworth to play in the BMW Championship or the BMW PGA Championship, I should say, together. So it's.
How about all 12 of them playing?
Isn't that amazing? Which is and I have no idea what to think about I don't know what any of this means. Like the fact that these guys they're doing scouting trips for the first time, that, not to say that the U.S. team hadn't scouted places before, but that was one sort of indictment of Paris, was just that they weren't necessarily prepped to play the course a certain way. It's like, we're not going to make that mistake again. And then, you got, traveling kind of back and forth. Like, I hope it's good. I think it's good. On the Europe side, I mean, I would think that a whole crew of guys going to prep and then going to play in a tournament together and kind of hanging out and getting meals together, I think that's good. But I guess we'll find out when they all show up in a couple weeks and tee it up in Rome. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's exciting, and we've already gotten to the phase of preparation where guys are putting some bulletin board material out there, and this is from SiriusXM PGA Tour Radio. Wyndham Clark was on with Drew Stoltz and Johnson Wagner. And I'm not going to quote him. I'm going to paraphrase him a little bit, so take this all with a grain of salt. But essentially, I think his gripe was that there are a lot of stats that said that Team Europe are better iron, maybe kind of mid to long iron players than Team USA. And his line of his thought was just that that's a skewed sort of number because the Team USA is actually they're better wedge players. They have some of the best ball strikers in the world. And his line was like, I think we can beat them in any of those categories. Do you love this or hate this? Or how do you feel about Wyndham as a first-time around Team USA coming out and saying, yeah, I'm confident, whichever format, whichever stat category, we can beat them across the board?
Yeah, no, I saw Rory say something along the lines of, I think if we have, better drivers of the ball, we're better with our middle irons and we're better putters. And I don't think they say like, hey, we are better. I think Rory was just referencing the overall strength of the team. And I think that was probably the comeback argument from Wyndham there. I guess that was probably talked about in the team room. I don't know when those comments came out, but obviously they probably had a glass of wine over it, talking their smack. And so you bring it home with you. Now I don't mind it. I think I've told you this. I think this is going to be one of the most compelling and competitive Ryder Cups because of just how equal these teams are. And you can argue that the Europe team is stronger up top. Like it's definitely a debate, but right now, what we've seen over this last year, you can't argue that Jon Rahm, Victor Hovland, and Rory McIlroy haven't dominated the sport at one time or another over the last couple of years. So, yeah, man, it's definitely, I love it. I don't know if we're going to see too much more of it in press conferences before, where guys are going to be talking a little bit. I think a lot of people would really love if Brian Harman and Wyndham Clark teamed up together and they'd both kind of take to the microphone, just being
talkers.
Just being talkers. So, hey, they're just like the cornerback on a team that just has to, talk your smack.
That's right. You got to have a few of them. And I think maybe this is also filed under the category of, because social media is just so pervasive in everything we do, that a guy comes on, says, a few words, just, he's being confident. Why wouldn't you be confident? You have to be confident heading into a competition like this. And of course they get plastered everywhere and people talk about whether or not it was a good idea to say that. But I kind of love it from Wyndham, and I love it on the same side, as Rory. And I think that's a really good point of like, we've talked so much about how Team Europe has slowly crept, more and more back into the picture from the team that got just boat raced at Whistling Straits to a team that has some of the best players in the world and now has a surprising amount of depth. So I kind of love this stuff in the build-up. I do think it is a little bit of an interesting phenomenon of, the guys who you might want to hear from or would be talking. You're probably going to hear less of that. Like a Scotty Scheffler basically has more or less said, like, after the way the season ended and the incessant questions that I'm sure I'd get about my putting in the lead up to this, I'm just not going to talk unless it's an obligated team sort of deal between now and when I tee it up at Marco Simone. I think Justin Thomas, is a incredibly open, willing to kind of share his thoughts on things, but I think for very good reason, probably doesn't want to do a lot of media in advance of this, given how much debate there's been around his captain's pick.
Yeah, there's nothing that JT can say right now.
Yeah,
he's got to,
and that's damn he doesn't. Yeah,
he just has to go out and just play good golf. There's nothing that you can say to defend yourself because you're just going to talk yourself into a corner.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, part of it is definitely interesting. I think it's a nice segue too, because we have the PGA Tour is back after a break that was maybe too short, but this is the interesting thing about this now, is because it's a different version of the fall than we've seen in past years, and probably overall a better version, because it gives guys the chance to get a little break if they'd like to take it. JT is one of the guys who's going to be in the field this weekend at the Fortinet Championship. You'll be out there in Napa calling the action on Golf Channel. So I don't know what your kind of thoughts are. If we've discussed a little bit, in this kind of, as we've reacted to schedule changes, but just what you're looking to see, who are you most excited to kind of see play this fall of the group that's maybe 51 and beyond, that has a chance to, like, there's stuff happening on two levels, right? There's like that pack right there at 51 through 70, let's say, who, if they have a good fall, they play their way into that next 10 category that gets them into, at least at the beginning of the year, the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am and the Genesis Invitational. And then there's like everyone beyond that where they're playing for their two cards. So are there guys you're kind of looking out for this week at the Fortinet? You're really kind of curious to see how they play?
Yeah, I look for young guys. These, obviously, we don't have the Korn Ferry Tour players yet playing in this. That's one important note in this, is that typically the Fortinet Championship has been the kickoff tournament for the PGA Tour season. Now it's still just like this carryover from the year, so it's very awkward, because Napa always used to be the start for all the fresh new faces. And so for me, when I look at this new fall season, and I look at this this event out at Napa, the Fortinet, I think about young guys. I think about who's hungry, like who's dying to make an impression. And to me, I don't know if Minwoo's playing, but like in that same category, Akshay Bhatia is a guy that I would look out for as someone who's like, what, I feel like I played well enough to have been in the playoffs if the points would have gone my way, if I would have been able to accumulate points, winning in Reno and having some other good starts. So guys like Akshay is definitely, he's got a point to prove, that, I should have been in those playoffs. I should have been able to accumulate the points. And, he got a big tee time. He's paired with, I believe, Justin in the first two rounds. I need to double check that. But that's a pretty strong statement the tour is set, pairing Akshay in that basically 1A category as far as tee times go.
Minwoo is actually a really interesting one. I'm glad you brought him up, because we pledged to be the #1 podcast to provide you updates of all things Minwoo Lee, cooking or otherwise.
He's probably BMW then, isn't he? He's a BMW.
He's playing BMW. So if you recall that conversation, the only fall event he's playing on the PGA Tour is going to be the Zozo, because he said, hey, I wanted to get back to Australia. I wanted to kind of shape my schedule around that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
but he had two paths, right? He was through special temporary members status. He was 100. He had the equivalent of 107th place on the FedEx Cup point standings. And so if you have the same amount of points as 125 or better at the end of the fall season, you would earn your tour card that way. So he could have gone out and played a bunch of PGA Tour events in the fall and just locked that up and been good to go. The other route that you can take is finishing top 10 on the DP World Tour Race to Dubai for players that are not otherwise qualified, right? So Rory and Rahm sit at the top of that list. He is fifth on that list, which makes him de facto third of the guys who could earn their tour card through that path.
Is that settle him? Is he settled in there? And like, how volatile are their rankings at the end of the year?
The hilarious thing is at the top, I think Rory's played like 8 events that count towards the Race to Dubai, and he has like almost 5,000 points. And Rahm's played 5 events, and he has like 2,600 points. So what Rory's doing is absolutely absurd in that standpoint. But then at 3, 4, 5, I think all those guys have around 1,900, 1,800 points. Like Minwoo could easily get in that mix. And so the interesting thing about that is that if you finish first, like if he finished effectively third, but first of guys who don't already have their tour status, you lock up full PGA Tour status for the next season, right?
Say it again. So if you finish first, like in that category for guys that aren't already exempt on the PGA Tour,
Yeah, just to simplify it, we should just throw out Rory and Rahm. So just pretend they don't exist, and so pretend he's third on that list.
On the list then?
So he'd be third on that list. So if he finishes first on that list, he earns full PGA Tour status for the 2024 season. Adrian Meronk and Victor Perez.
Adrian Meronk, the guy that was left at the altar.
I know, right? The European Keegan. Yeah. So you wonder what kind of motivation he has. But yeah, I mean, I think that. But here's the thing, though, is that if he doesn't finish first, you get your tour card, but you're subject to all these different reshuffles, which I'm not sure you're subject to those same reshuffles if you would have played the PGA Tour Fall and tried to kind of earn your way in, with top 2025 or better status. Via the special temporary membership that he earned. It's all very convoluted, but it is a little bit intriguing that Minwoo decided to take the DP World Tour route and take a little bit of a gamble that he could finish at the top of that list instead of going out and beating fields he could definitely beat on the PGA Tour Fall schedule and just locking up his card that way.
Well,
you find that interesting at all?
He'll get guaranteed points and money at Zozo. I don't think that's a cut event. So definitely has that in his favor if he plays well, that he knows he's not going to move back that week.
Yeah. Yeah, well, exactly. And he may very well. That's the thing, too, is that if you finish top 125, you do not count against those 10 tour cards coming from the race to Dubai. So he might get it both ways and be fine. But it's an interesting decision. And, of course, it's one we must discuss because we are your number one Minwoo Lee fan update news podcast. So we have to do justice there.
Get back to Fortinet, though. The field is not strong. And I don't know if that's how it's going to be the rest of the fall.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's really not strong. I was sitting there looking at the field list and I was thinking in my head, I was like, I wonder where I would be like slated in. I'm not far off from getting into the Fortinet. I'm going to tell you that right now. It wasn't that far away. Could have been pretty close. I have no intentions of playing right now. So just for all the guys out there cheering for the comeback.
I'm clipping this.
I don't even know where my golf clubs are right now. I went to the golf course the other day with my clubs. And I had to shoot some content stuff, and I ran out of time that didn't even get to hit a golf ball. So it's a different world right now with me and the golf clubs.
I've probably played maybe 2 times as much golf as you this summer.
I 2 times.
Do you think it's more than that?
100% it's more than that. It's like 4 times more. And like you've hit like, of the top 100 golf courses, you've hit 10 of them. So you've had really a one for the record books. It's been a heck of a season for you.
It's been a good one. I had to get it all in before, got a big spinal surgery coming up in October that I'm not looking forward to. And my sincere hope for all of you listening or watching is that I get to pop up on this podcast in about a month and a half wearing a giant donut around my neck, and you can laugh at me because that tough would scene. Just be it'll be a tough scene, but I'm just leaning into it at this point. But yeah, I mean, it's despite the amount of golf I'm playing, golf at good courses, but bad golf, I'm nowhere near the Fortinet Championship field as you are. And I think, I mean, look, like I am okay with that. Like, I'm okay with that. I think it's like you can't really, as we're talking about all this new version of the PGA Tour and what changes we're trying to make to appease the top players and with the knock-on effects of those changes, who are we forcing out, and who are we kind of taking away opportunities from? Like, this is set up to give opportunities to that group that is maybe going to feel a little slighted when the full calendar year rolls around next year and they can't get into the signature events. And so it's like, here's your chance to earn some money.
Look at the Korn Ferry guys. If you're Ben Coles right now on the Korn Ferry Tour, you're like, dude, get me off of this tour. I have proven a point that I should be in Napa. And that to me is where the tour's missed the mark on this, is like these guys that have, whoever's in the field, the back half of this field, they shouldn't be in this field. It should be substituted with 30 of the Korn Ferry guys. Like, there's no world where the Korn Ferry guys their playoffs shouldn't be over by now. They have to end when the Tour Championship ends. I just don't understand why the Korn Ferry Tour goes through a week after the Ryder Cup. It just makes zero sense to me. I know the new deal is that it's going to be a calendar year, but still, it's these guys. All right, correct me if I'm wrong. The guys in the fall don't earn FedEx Cup points. They do because it's their season, but they're not accumulating FedEx Cup points for next season. So in my head, it's like who cares if these top 30 guys go? It just doesn't make any sense to me why it's a full year for these guys. It just doesn't make sense that the 51st guy on the FedEx Cup needs to go play golf. To me, they earn their spot.
And 51 through 70 have their status locked up.
100%.
I think they literally do. I think that
yeah. You've made the playoffs, you have status, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, to me, right. it's just the, the
scheduling's odd. And I wonder if that's something that they'll clean up in future years, where they'll try to align those to give everyone a chance to kind of get in that next category. And you're still doing, the top players a favor by giving them the FedEx Cup point head start so they can play into those next 10 swing 5 categories for the next season. But at the same time, letting those Korn Ferry Tour guys get in and at least have a chance to play their way, kind of into some of those categories. But I think
it doesn't make sense. Hear me out. So the Tour Championship just ended.
Yeah.
It just ended. The season's
over. Yeah.
So why is the 200th guy on the FedEx Cup have an opportunity to still somehow jump back in to good status from the year? They lost, they missed the mark is what I'm getting at. The old system to me made much more sense because it was so cut and dry on the numbers. And now a guy who didn't have a good season at all gets into this event, which he never would ever get into, is now getting another opportunity for a second chance. I liked the old system, and it's hey, go play in the Korn Ferry Tour Championship with all, with the Korn Ferry guys who didn't get their card, or it's 26 to 75. Those guys, and then 126 to 200. It just made sense. Put everybody in there, make it a playoffs. I don't know why we got away from that system, because to me, that was the way to get back. This just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because, all right, so walk me through this. So a guy who was 200th in the FedEx Cup goes and wins the Fortinet this week. So I don't know who that name would be. Let's say they go win in Napa this week.
Okay.
So that obviously earns them status. But let's say they finish second. Okay, they earned 300 FedEx Cup points. Now, where exactly would that jump a guy who had 50? So he has 350 points. So now he's somewhere around 125 in the FedEx Cup. So is this guy, when he finishes at, let's say now he was at 200, now he's at 125 come the RSM, where exactly is he? Where does he sit? Does he have status? Does he just in the top 10 thing? Where is that player now?
Top 125 will earn status. And here, to use your exact example, William McGirt is 200th on the list with 86 points. If he earns 300 points for a win at the Ford, I don't even know if he's in the field, but let's just say he's in the field, right? Then that would get him to 386, which would have him at 114th on the list just before Taylor Pendrith, right? So that would earn him, if he stayed in that top 125, then he's got his tour card locked up for the next season. So it
just doesn't make sense. The season already happened. It just doesn't make sense.
This is definitely one it's definitely one that they're going to have to iron out. I think what is happening here is, and I'm not trying to be a tour apologist here, but it's what has happened here is there were outside unnatural forces, whether you want to attribute that to live or the PIF or more money or, just general top star player resentment building over the years and saying, you guys need to do more for us. And that comes to a head. And then you have to make a bunch of changes that are probably not as planned out or well thought out as maybe you would have liked them to be. I mean, look at the way the schedule rollout went and, how last year it's okay, they're elevated events. Wait, no, don't call them that. We're going to call them the designated events now. And it's oh no, now they're actually the signature events. It's the rollout on this has not really been as clean as probably you'd want it to be if you're a major pro sports.
You think? I'm sitting here reading through all my material being the analyst in the booth this week, and I'm thinking to my head, man, this is there's just so much going on that I'm going to have to recalibrate. And then on top of that, they rerouted the golf course at Fortinet. So there's going to be times where I'm here at the 12th hole, I'm that's not number 12. This is a new 12. So I'm going to have to get used to that next week. That's going to be a big thing that we talk about, just how the golf course is going to play. But Man,
yeah, I just think when it comes down to it, it's like it's gonna take some time to figure out. And I think like the issue they have now is like you had a lot of mouths at the top of the heap that want to get fed, and you fed them the majority of what you had, and now you don't have as much food to kind of go around for the lesser mouths. And it's like, how are we going to work this out so that you are giving the Korn Ferry Tour guys a fair shake? Or I mean, even
the
like
Korn
this
Ferry guys that really lose in this.
The DP World Tour 10 cards, they come in ahead of the Korn Ferry Tour cards. Is that fair?
No,
I'm not sure that it is.
No, that's right. So the big losers in this right now are the Korn Ferry Tour guys. They should be in Napa. And I didn't even know what you just said there about the top 10 from the DP World Tour being in front of your Korn Ferry guys. Like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense at all to me. So, man, it just is. I can understand why now when you look at where the FedEx Cup playoffs end and how many cards, 50, inside of 50, you're good. 50 to 70, you have status, but you can shuffle around. I can see why it's so tight now, because you have the DP World Tour bringing in 10. You got, instead of 25, you got 30 Korn Ferry Tour players. But, man, it's going to be, I think we have to let it play out. But in my head, I'm thinking to myself, like, a guy who had a really not a great year can pass up a guy who, let's say, somebody that was around 100, let's say 115th in the FedEx Cup. Typically on a year, whoever the player would be, that's not a bad year. It's not a bad year. It's overall, that has always been the goal. If you're inside the top 125, then it was deemed a successful season, because guess what? You took a job from somebody else away. Like, this is my job. And I don't really like the idea of, like, the season ended at the Tour Championship, but wait, no, you could still take my job away from me. So I don't really necessarily love this fall stuff the way it's designed.
I think we are going to have at least one, maybe a few examples at the end of the fall. We're going to be like, that guy got screwed, that guy got screwed, that guy got screwed, and it's going to be something to talk about, and it'll be interesting. And the hope is that the tour looks at that and is like, okay, look, I get it. It's a whole other set of changes, but we got to get this thing right so that we're giving the guys who deserve opportunities.
Well, I think we all like the idea of the top 10 or the whatever these
the next 10 in the swing 5. I think it's and then also depending on how they use those 4 sponsor exemptions, like, in theory, it could work pretty well, but it's like, let's see it in practice.
Well, that all sounds great to me if the Korn Ferry Tour guys were there. That would be really cool to see somebody like there's so many very compelling names on the Korn Ferry Tour that are going to get cards this year, and I would love to see them get off to hot starts and be able to play their way into some of those early season events. And now they're not going to have any opportunity to get into those big events early.
Well, theoretically, right? That's what the Swing 5 should be for. They should be able to get into some of those early season events
What's Swing 5?
The Swing 5 are like we're not taking so next 10 is all based on
how you play,
like rolling FedEx Cup points list, right? So
starts at scratch at Fortinet.
No. So next 10 is basically this. It's like,
God, why is it so complicated? We talked about this so many times.
Next 10 is basically this. It's like,
is it 51 to 60 right now?
Yeah, exactly. Next 10 right now is if you're like, hey, guess what? We're not playing the FedEx Cup Fall at all. We're just fast forwarding to the Century Field's already set. We're fast forwarding to the next year, and 2024 started. And who are we going to take to play in the AT&T Pro Am and the Genesis? It would be 51 through 60. So this FedEx Cup Fall really extended all the way back into the whole season. That points list, the top 10 on that points list that are not otherwise qualified through finishing top 50, in the previous year, or tournament winner, or any of those other categories, those 10 will enter the field. Now, the Swing 5 is only based on how you played in the little stretch run of non-signature events.
And that starts when?
So that will start
Fortinet.
No. That will not. That starts next year. So like before.
Okay.
Like I'm not going to get
So
the
nobody-
exact tournaments right. But
really
it's like
nobody at
like
this
to get
century.
into the AT&T or the Genesis. It's like it's going to depend on how you play it. Like the Sony or like the Amex or whatever events happened before then. It's just who played well, who finished the top 5 in FedEx Cup points for those events. So theoretically, Korn Ferry Tour guys, guys who just earned their cards should be able to, if you play well and you aren't already in through any of the other categories, you can get in that way. And I guess my thought on that is like, okay, good. Like 5 spots are good, but you know what I'd really love to see is with those 4 sponsor exemptions. I know there are going to be some big names that have missed out.
Yeah,
that people they're going to be tempted.
that.
But please use those on some of those other young guys and Korn Ferry Tour guys, and give them a shot to make it. Like if they're number 6 on that list, or better yet, if you're 11th on the next 10 list, like let's get those guys in because they deserve it, and they're the guys who should be getting playing opportunities. So we'll see how it goes.
If you're sitting here listening and you're like, man, how does Smylie not have any, like, why does he not understand this concept? It doesn't. I think it's so confusing because my brain is so wired for our fall that we've always had. And just our playoff system, and it was so easy to figure out, and it wasn't confusing. And now, like the next 10 thing, in my head, the next 10 represented, this whole fall series, like the 10 best guys who played the best would be at the top of those rankings heading in to the early calendar year. To me, that makes sense because like what else is this fall for? It's just mind numbing.
I've read the PGA Tour article that announced the 2024 schedule with all the next 10, or swing 5. I probably read that 35 times, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
Is there an audio book version of that? Like apparently, because when I read it, I just don't.
Maybe that's what we need to get into on the Smylie Show is some audio. We can just take the PGA Tour news releases and we can do like some ASMR readings of them.
Just doesn't
to make it easily
any
digestible. That was
all right. So
that was a tangent I didn't expect to take. But
let me ask you one question
Okay.
too. So is 125 still the number come the end of this? Like RSM, is it still 125?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So a guy who is, for instance, 125 right now, and he finished, or let's say whoever finishes 126, it's still going to have that same 126 to 150 category and the same 150 to 200. Actually, I don't know if there is a 150 to 200 category. I think that's miscard, but so that's the way, like that's
correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Although even within that, it's like there's like a there's like a bonus sort of category where it's
Stop
like
it.
It's and this is bringing in your favorite category of all, special temporary membership. Like if you earn the same amount of points as 125 or better, you get a card, but it's not like you bump out 125.
Okay, that's
There's
always
just like a
that's
bonus
always
card.
been a thing.
Yeah.
That was like the Will Zalatoris, didn't make the playoffs.
Right.
Same with Akshay and Minwoo last year. So
I like this audiobook idea. There's something there. I'm gonna just kind of ideate on that a little bit. Come back with a half-baked idea. We got a really, really good interview with Brett McCabe to get to that is focused on like just the psychology of playing in big events, specifically the Ryder Cup coming up. There are 3 different players that Brett works with: Sam Burns, John Rahm, and Brian Harmon, who are going to be playing in this Ryder Cup. So I'm really excited to get to that. I just want to just have one kind of finishing question for you before we get to Brett, which is Fortinet this weekend. JT, this kind of leads us into the Ryder Cup discussion. What are you looking to see, or what would you like to see from JT this weekend in Napa to really kind of make you feel like this is he's ready to go for Rome?
I think just running through his processes just looks. I think one of the things that I felt like towards the end of the year just looked like he was, definitely trying hard, but definitely like not comfortable in his routines, and you could just tell he was thinking a lot. I would be, thrilled to watch him, I would be fine with him hitting bad shots, but like know exactly what to work on. Like I just to visually see him not feel like he's searching and knowing, like, I think a good formula for him would be to have offense. So even if he's got a little, some 3 or 4 bogeys around, but go make 7, 8 birdies, I think that would be a better formula than trying to play too perfect and trying to prove like, I can play, this perfect style golf that I've played in the past. And I think when you listen to this Brett McCabe interview, you'll definitely know that I think that's the rut that a lot of players get into, is they try to play too perfect and they don't remember when they were playing well that they hit bad shots too. They just couldn't quite let it go. So I think that's something I believe this week, if JT can just go out and go try to make a bunch of birdies and have fun, I think, and just forget about like his like having the perfect form heading into the Ryder Cup. I think that would be a good goal for JT, and I'll definitely be looking out for that.
Yeah, without a doubt. So there you have it. That's kind of our our Fortinet preview and an extended ramble on the reformatted FedEx Cup Fall. Let's get to that Brett McCabe interview. Right. Oh, well, let's almost get to the Brett McCabe interview. Smylie, you have one more thing to say?
I have one more thought that we didn't get into,
okay.
And it was about the BMW Championship. We talked about all 12 of the guys that are playing.
Yeah. We need to talk about that.
I just wanted to make a note that all 12 guys are paired together in threesomes. And I think that's something that we could take a peek at real quick, is like, are these pairings guys that we might see together at the Ryder Cup? Because I'm sitting here looking at.
Let's do.
So
I was not even aware of this until you said it. This is fantastic.
Yeah. No, this is definitely something we need to get into. And right now I'm seeing Rory McIlroy, Victor Hovland, and Aberg. So Ludwig Aberg, Victor Hovland, and Rory McIlroy. So we talked about
that's interesting.
Aberg and Rory potentially playing together.
Or what about Aberg and Vic? That could be interesting.
That's definitely definitely an option. The next one, Tommy Fleetwood, Shane Lowry, and Sepp Straka. So if Sepp Straka and Shane Lowry play together and don't lose a match, they're going to be folk heroes in Rome. I feel like those two together.
Wow. That was the Husky. That was a Husky boys. Exactly. That was a Husky boys combo I completely missed out on. I was so focused on Sepp and Rom.
It's a better
Sepp and Lowry's even better.
Yeah. Hey, and two.
That's amazing.
Shane and Sepp both play the same golf ball, so don't look past that might be an option.
Boys. Z Stars. Love to hear
so keep working down the list. I got John Rahm, Højgaard, and Tyrrell Hatton. So Hatton and Rahm would be a nasty pairing together. I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't watched Højgaard play a ton of golf, so looking forward to watching him play. I've heard it's like Steve Stricker with power, so I'm looking forward to seeing. I think, and I could be wrong, I think he's a jailbird guy. Either that or he's got like kind of like a saber tooth that looks similar to it. I gotta stick with my jailbird guys. So no, I think, and it's interesting there. Like I definitely Rahm Hatton, but like that we're also looking to like Rahm and Rory, maybe even Vic to a certain extent. Who's going to take the younger guys under their wing? So I wonder if that's what's happening there with Rahm and Højgaard. Like there's look at the analytics and they said this could be a good pairing to kind of get Nikolai some experience with Rahm. If Hatton and Rahm play together, I'm telling you what, they are both very angry when they play golf. I think
Volcano boys.
We have to cut so many mics of audio from both of those two guys, and if they play together, it would just be so many emotions, and I would actually love to watch those two play together because they are such good competitors, but they're also two of my favorite putters that I think kind of mirror their tempos and their strokes mirror each other. When you go watch their putting strokes, it's the same. It's the exact same cadence in their backstroke and through stroke. I think they would be great together, and I'll get to the last group so we can kind of get through it. Justin Rose, Bobby Mack, otherwise known as Scotland's Robert McIntyre, and the Englishman Matthew Fitzpatrick. So maybe Justin Rose and Matthew Fitzpatrick would be the all-English pairing, and Bobby Mack's never played a Ryder Cup. It'd be interesting to see how much he plays and who he plays with. He, to me, seems kind of like the oddball of this whole group. It's like I wouldn't be surprised if he only played like 2 matches, and that's not because of his play. I just see that maybe like he might be the oddball out. Like if there's another guy that they're like, hey, we're going to send out this hot pairing this afternoon, we're going to send Bobby Mack for both matches. So that wouldn't surprise me at all. But he's a hell of a player too, and probably would pair well with let's see, Rose or Fitzpatrick. I don't know how well he'd pair with them.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably a fair observation. Despite qualifying through the European points list, I think he's definitely the guy that probably will sit the most. You'd imagine. I think that in that group, if we're talking about
even
Rahm
Rosie too. Yeah,
Rosie, yeah. Well, I mean, so we're talking about Rahm and Hatton being really fiery guys that. Fitzpatrick and Rose seem to have more of that sort of even keel demeanor and could really kind of, not that, I think the thing that people look at a lot with this type of stuff is like, oh, we need to kind of do an opposites thing. But, in reality, it's like maybe having a guy that is a similar demeanor to you kind of keeps you on that same level throughout the match. And I know Bobby Mack, especially in that Scottish Open where he nearly, beat Rory, had a little bit of fire there on the back nine, making putts, making a charge on Sunday. But in general, seems to be more of like an even keel type guy. So maybe that's what's happening there with those three guys of just, kind of guys that can play a real balanced, calm role as partners.
Yeah. And, I felt like it was important for us to kind of, we mentioned that Team Europe was over at BMW, but I'm sitting here kind of flipping through it and see that all 12 guys are paired together. There's the only guys that are playing at Fortinet. Well, first off, I think it's interesting that Zach Johnson's playing in Napa, and same with Stuart Sink. He's a vice captain, but maybe it's just good for him to take his mind off of just the Ryder Cup in general and just go play golf and get away from it. Because I definitely want to talk to Zach on. I would love to have him on, but the one question I want to ask of him is just how difficult is it to be a captain, because you have to, it's 2 years of prep and it feels like it never gets here. We were just talking about it earlier. It's like, I think the Ryder Cup just feels so far away, but it's interesting that he's playing and the fact that, Max and JT are both playing at Fortinet. It's typical for the PGA Tour to split up their star. Like if there's only two big stars, which for this week it's Max and JT, they're going to put them in opposite waves. They do that for TV, but it would have been nice to see like maybe 4 players that we could have had a couple Ryder Cup pairings similar to this, but good for Europe, man. That's definitely doesn't hurt things to see all those guys playing together. I think that helps the guys, especially if you're looking for a guy. It's like, all right, this is what if you've never played with a guy much, you know what I mean? It's you're now watching him in competition. You can see what he's doing well, what he's not doing well, and maybe you kind of know it's like, hey, this is when I need to be aggressive because I watched him at the BMW and this wasn't a shot he liked, or this is a shot that I know he can pull off. So I think I think this is a big deal that all these guys are playing together.
Too. How about Luke Donald in a threesome with the Molinari brothers?
Of course.
I didn't
know Eduardo still played.
Yeah, he's been playing. I think maybe it's just this season where he's popped back up on my radar, but several DP World Tour tournaments. So
he still does all the statistic stuff for everybody, and he still plays.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know why. Sometimes my brain has trouble wrapping around.
People can do two things.
People can do two things. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, and on the American side, I think to your point, it's like, okay, if you want to split up Hulme and JT, that's totally fine. But like maybe you could have thrown Zach Johnson in one of those groups just to hang out, or I don't know if that's too much pressure. But like he's in a pairing with KH Lee and Andrew Putnam.
If they would have put Zach and JT together in a group, that would have been like. I would have, regardless of anything I would have said on the broadcast, I feel like nothing I could have said was right because everybody just wanted me to probably criticize the picks. They were like, why did Zach pick JT? And now he's talking about all their good golf shots when they're not good golf shots. And it's like, oh God, this is a broadcaster's nightmare.
Zach just like walking around, like helping JT line up his putts, like really trying to make sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really, really good observation on your side. And I think that that can only help. I mean, it's like these guys are all, because you could go from a very cohesive team exercise, at Marco Simone, and then go and then get split up into a bunch of different configurations, and now we're all competing against each other again. Try to win a tournament. Not to say that they aren't going to try to beat each other, but going and being in these little kind of pods, 3-man pods the whole week, kind of gives you something where it's like, yeah, we're still teammates, we're still bonding, we're hanging out ahead of the Ryder Cup. I think it can only help.
Dude, so, all right. So one last question: how many of those players of the 12 Ryder Cup European players, how many of those guys finished in the top 10?
Oh, that is.
Can you imagine if they have like 8 of the top 10?
I was going to say, I'm trying to think what the over under is that you'd set. Like, I would say
It's like a really good football team that you're about to play goes out and wins by 5 or 6 touchdowns against a good team, and you're like, man, we got to go play against that. It's like if they have 8 guys finish in the top 10 or something like that. That I think how this group plays at the BMW is going to be a big storyline. Like going into it's like the recency bias thing. We're going to talk about how the form is of these guys, and it's going to be their last event. It's going to be the BMW. So
I'd set that over under at 5.5, and I think
you set it at 5.5. Like that
I set at 5.5, and I think it's either 4.5 or 5.5. I think good vibes.
I think it's 4.5. And
you think you set at 4.5, and you're taking unders or over?
That's just math. Like I'm taking 4.5. Just and it might. I'm gonna take the over. I got it right at 5.
Over.
I'm gonna put it right at 5.
So I was gonna set it at 5.5 and take the under because I thought 5. So we're arriving at the same place. I think 5. I think 5 feels like a good number. Yeah, we're just different odds makers. I'm a much more generous book. So,
but let's say they have 8 or 9 finish in the top 10, or God willing, all 10 finish in the top 10, or 10 of the 12 finish the top 10. Or what if they have? I don't know if there's a cut at the BMW. Let's say like 8 of them miss the cut. That's like that also is a storyline too. So we're looking at it on this side, but let's look on the other side of the fence too.
Yeah, or they could just they should just play like a I don't know how you term it because it's a threesome, but they should just play all shot and just get DQ'd. But hey, we're just working out the kinks of all shot here. We don't care where we finish the tournament. We're just here to get a little reps in. So